Hi, my name is Mike Stoneburn. I'm an alcoholic. Thomas has been asking me for a while, and I've been putting him off. This is like my least favorite part of the program. But I need to stand up for AA because AA has been there for me. My sobriety date is 10/28/10. No, it's 6/28/10. And so I've only been sober a couple years, but my life has changed dramatically, quite a bit. Hella nervous. So I grew up in the Midwest. I come from a large Catholic Irish family. Pretty normal, no problems, so to speak. I was always in trouble at school. I've always been a high-strung guy, and that's caused a lot of trouble in my life. So I've always been irritable, discontent, and never known why. I didn't read until the 3rd grade, so I was behind the 8 ball, and there was a lot of fear behind that. I thought I wasn't smart enough. Why couldn't I do what the other kids were doing? What was wrong with me? Teased a lot, so the only thing I knew how to do was to fight. It was fight or flight. So the fear was in me from the get-go, and it just grew and grew and grew. And later on in life, when I added booze, it just got worse. So these are everything that I say is my experience or my opinion. I mean, it's just me. I'd like to welcome the newcomer, Bo, and happy birthday, man. So I feel that this disease is mind, body, and spirit. The mental part is one symptom is common. They cannot start drinking without developing a phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as have suggested, may be manifested as an allergy which differs these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently extracted. The only relief was that we suggest entire abstinence. So I never understood. Like, I drank because it calmed me down. It slowed me down. I'm a private person. It made me more open. I would talk to the girls. I wasn't as shy. But I was a bully, and it didn't work for me. I didn't understand the mental obsession, and I admitted that I was an alcoholic probably at about 30, and I came to that conclusion because I couldn't stay out of court. I couldn't keep a girlfriend for more than a couple years. My mom was always mad. I was always in trouble. So I didn't understand that it was there was an allergy and a mental obsession, and I'd had a God in my life my whole life. I grew up in the Bible Belt. My family's very religious. It was just it was just part of life. I didn't understand spirituality. Like, religion is the book and the teaching. Spirituality is the feeling that goes along that. That's for me. So later on in life, probably in high school, I drank, occasionally after ball games, socially, but I really was never a social drinker, and I didn't realize that. Like, me and a couple buddies would get a 6-pack, and we'd all split a 6-pack, but I would always have my personal stash, a little Southern Comfort or something like that, and that just progressed in my life. I started to get involved in sports, and it was about sports and girls, and school was kind of, do the bare minimum, which always caused problems with my folks. So then I was pretty much a managing alcoholic for many years. Out of high school, I went to work for UPS, and I worked there for 18 years. That job pretty much was my life. My work defined me. I mean, I grew up with it's about family, God, and a man's work, and you stood behind all of those. So I did fairly well at UPS. I was a driver. I was aggressive on sales. I was happy. I met a lady, moved in with her, lived with her for about 10 years, and in that time, like, I can never pinpoint when I crossed the line to when alcohol took over my life. But somewhere around 30, she asked me to stop, or she was going to leave, and I was scared. You know, I didn't want to be alone. I loved her, so I tried to stop, and I could stop long enough to get her off my frame, or I could stop long enough to get off of probation, or to get my ticket signed. But I never really had a desire. I mean, I was irritable, discontent, and just a mess. That was the only way that I knew to cope. Little did I know, years later I'd find out that I wasn't coping. I wasn't living, I was existing. And my life got pretty dark. That girlfriend left. I calmed down for a while. They talk about in the book, The Actor, how we lead two different lives. That was me. I mean, nice things, nice house, pretty girlfriend, all the toys. But I was miserable. I mean, you know, I judged my life in material things and not in spiritually richness. As my alcoholism took over my life, I lost any contact with God. I had started to I've done some pretty horrific things, and we don't need to go into that. But I've crossed every line in the sand that I've ever drawn. I've just annihilated what I defined, who I thought I was supposed to be. All my morals were prostituted. I turned into a punk thug, and it didn't matter. I mean, it was what Mike wanted. It was all about me. It didn't matter if I was hurting other people, destroying people, stepping on people to come up. I was a selfish, self-centered person. At that point, I see now that I don't even think I was a man, because I wasn't acting like a man. And when my life got really, really dark, it was my thought process that God didn't want anything to do with me, because He knows what I've done. And growing up in the church, I pretty much broke every commandment that you can break, and laws of man. I mean, I wasn't a good person. I wasn't a gentleman. I wasn't a gentleman. I lost sight of God, and I just thought that because I was making good money and I had nice things, I was all right, and I got this. And I ran like that for probably 10 more years. So this pretty much describes a big chunk of my life. It's in a vision for you. The less people tolerated us, the more we withdrew from society, from life itself. I used to be very outgoing. I became a loner. As we became subjects of King Alcohol, shivering demises of his mad realm, the chilling vapor that is loneliness settled down. I could be around a lot of people, even with my big family, and I just didn't feel like I fit in. I felt like I very much felt alone, and that's a feeling that is extremely scary, and I hope to never feel like that again. It thickens and becomes ever blacker. Some of us sought out sordid places, hoping to find understanding, companionship, and approval. Momentarily we did. Then would come oblivion and the awful awakening to face the hideous four horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. Unhappy drinkers who read this page will understand. That was me. I was scared to go out of my own house. I was scared to do anything except go to work, and there was many times where I didn't do that. I mean, I prided myself on being a good worker, and I thought I was 100% when you're there, making them as much money as you can, or just I lost sight of I just needed to be a good person, because I'm representing myself, I'm representing them, but it was all about the dollars for me, and and I look back and I wasn't a good employee. How many times did I go to work hungover? I got a couple of DUIs and lost that job. And in this DD class that I went to, I learned about alcohol and how the body breaks it down and how long it truly takes to break down alcohol. And in the amounts that I was drinking, I was higher than a kite at work, which endangers the public, and it's just, that scares the living out of me. It's just, I see that now. So, I have a lot of regrets in my life, but I used to be under the impression that my past was who I was, and I no longer think that. I'm sorry for my past. And I try every day today to be the man that I know that I can, to be a child of God, to treat you as children of God. For me today, it's about what do I have to offer, and I always get fed. I was always worried about feeding me and taking from you, and it was a struggle. And now I've turned it over to a higher power, and I see that I had it flip-flopped. When you're giving, you receive so much more. That's been my experience. So we'll go back a little bit. So I got a DUI. UPS sent me to treatment. It was all about trying to keep my job. So I did what they said, and I thought I could just drink on the weekends, and that never really worked out for me. Anyway, a little bit down the line, I got a second DUI. They let me go. Complete loss, a mess, just robbing, stealing, borrowing things that weren't mine, just all kinds of crazy things. Lots of violence, lots of arrests. So the wheels had completely fallen off. The lady I lived with was gone. My family had quit inviting me around. I have a lot of nieces and nephews. I was no longer part of their lives. My buddies didn't really come around too much. I was no longer on the foursome in golf that I had played with. It was just, I was alone, and I was scared. And at this point, I had already been puking blood for a couple of years, and it just, that didn't wake me up. And my folks, thank God, stepped in and said, you know what, either you get some help or we don't want nothing to do with you. And my mom told me that, and that just crushed me. I couldn't imagine, I just, why stick around if that's the case? So I was thinking about it. My dad brought it up, and I was thinking about it, and I was sitting in the mirror, brushing my teeth, and I looked in the mirror, and I didn't know who the hell I was looking at. I didn't have a clue. I didn't have blue eyes. I had yellow eyes. I was as red as a beet. I weighed about 130 pounds. I was in rough shape, and at that point I was scared out of my mind because my body's falling apart. People are dropping off like flies. It just, I had always prided myself that I didn't want you to know my business. I wasn't going to ask you for help, and I was just going to buck up and handle it. And that doesn't work. It didn't work for me anyway. So I kind of half-heartedly said, yeah, we'll go. My dad said, hey, will you go to church with your mom and I? And I said, yeah. And I remember sitting in church shaking because I didn't have any booze in me yet. And I was just, tick, 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 and everyone's looking at me, you know. They all know. And after that, my dad said, how about we drop your mom off and we go for a ride? And I just want to talk. And I said, it really wasn't a question. That's just kind of how my pa is. He just, you know, he'll form it in a question, but it's not a question. Yes, sir. And so we drove over to Calistoga, and we drove up to Duffy's, and I saw Duffy's, and I didn't know what it was, and I thought it was a hunting lodge. And I was pretty excited, you know, because I was going to spend some time with my dad, and we hadn't done that for a long time. And turns out it's for hooch and dope. There's no birds there at all. And so I toured the place, and then we came home, and I didn't even know this, but my parents had already had it all lined up. I was going back on Monday, and all I had to do was get my finances in order, and I went over to Duffy's, and that's when my life changed. Not right away. I went over there for 3 months in the summer, and I was mad as hell. I sat on the front porch for a couple days and just cried and just bitched about the $21,000 I just spent, and that was going to be my golf cart, and you know, my life is over. I couldn't imagine life without booze. It'd been so long since I'd been sober or clean or just, you know, a regular frame of mind. So I sat over there for a long time, and a couple weeks, and there's a lady over there that was a counselor, and she just knew how I felt. Like the whole time I felt that you know, I was a one-man band. You guys didn't have a clue of what I was thinking about. And she just sat me down and said, I know how you feel. And I said, you don't know shit. And she told me what I was feeling, and she was right on the money. Plus, she added some that I was holding back. And so she said, what's the hang-up? And I said, well, I'm going to hell anyway. So, you know, what's the use? And so she let that lie a little bit, and then I did an exercise, and I'd always had this God in my mind of when I was a kid, you know, right out of the church. We did an exercise where you wrote down all the things that you would have your higher power be. And I wrote down loving, kind, forgiving. Like I was okay with forgiving others, but I could never forgive myself, and I still kind of can hold grudges a little bit, you know, but I'm getting better at that. So I wrote down forgiving. So we write them all down, and I go back to my room, and Eloise pops in, and she says, can I see your assignment? And we were looking at it, and she says, forgiving. Well, all those things that you want your higher power to be, those are things that you have, that you have. So we sat down, and she talked, and she said, Mike, he's already forgiven you. How long are you going to beat your head against the wall? And are you going to die? Or are you going to embrace this and become a joy? Start living life. And then that's when I started to to open my mind to this program, the open-minded part. So now I have this belief that there is hope. You know, I see some hope, and I'm going to get to that hope by taking leaps of faith. I'm a guy, it's got to be in my hand. I got to see it. And for the longest time, you know, it was, what about God? I don't see it. But the longer I'm in this program, the longer I in the book, the more I work with my sponsor, I see it every day in all phases of my life. From a smile on someone's face to just someone being kind, opening the door, laughter. I mean, there's a lot of good in this world. I mean, it warmed my heart. I heard on the radio that the Redwood Gospel Mission served like 5,000 meals. That if that ain't God working, then I'm not too sure what is. So I spent the remainder of that time thumping my book, because it just showed me that there was an answer and there was hope, and that answer was turning it over, asking for help when I don't know the answers. The biggest thing is I don't have to do it alone. I worked the steps with my sponsor, who was really patient with me and didn't bolt and run when I came clean. I had seen the steps. I was going to do 1, 2, 3, skip a couple in the middle, and do the end. And his big thing is, we'll see, which used to make me really mad. We'll see, but it's totally true. We'll see how things pan out. It just works. So I got right with God, and my life started to change, and that gave me the hope. And then I continued the faith. I just went out on a limb. I took suggestions for the first time in my life. Still struggle with that a little bit on the work end, but I started to listen to what other people were saying at meetings, and okay, man, she looks pretty happy. I'm going to give that a shot, or I'd hear something from him, and so I just kind of pieced my own program together, but sticking to the steps, and that I wasn't going to tell another man my fears, my faults, my dreams. You know, I wasn't going to share that with anyone. That was a gift, and I think that gift came from God. That's a blessing. I was really surprised when he didn't bolt, but he didn't. And then I just kept going through them. My amends. So my life has been changing over this last couple of years, and I feel like I know who I am. I try to live these steps. This is like it's not about booze and dope anymore. It's about just being a good guy, and these steps could work whatever the problems are. So I just went out. I've been making amends. I have most of them done, and I'm willing to make the ones that I haven't got finished yet. I just don't know where the people are, but I'm sure at the least comfortable time they'll show up, and that'll let me know what kind of man I am, what kind of character I have. Do I stand up and power through and be okay with however they turn out, or do I shy and run away? So far, I'm becoming a man of character, and that's out of this book. It's just teaching me. To me, character is the will to do what is right as God defines right, regardless of the cost. That's my biggest thing. I want to be a man that says, if I'm going to be there, I'm there. Um, i- i- if you need help, I'm there, no matter how uncomfortable it is for me. So on the making the amends, I was. I didn't tell Nick this, but when we were going through number 9 on the amends, there was ones that I had a part in them. I saw that, but I just wasn't ready yet. So I started off with my smaller amends, and I started to clean it up. And for the most part, it was pretty well received, which was another boost of hope, which told me that if I follow this faith and I walk this walk, and I follow the steps as my guide, and I walk with another man, that I'm going to be all right. My lifestyle is completely different. I hang out with none of the thugs that I used to hang out with, and that I don't miss it. I did in the beginning. I missed the drama and the havoc and the just that rush that you get from doing bad things, and now I get that rush from doing good things. Now I hang out with most of my friends that I hang out with are in the club. It's just, for me, it's I stick my nose in the book. I'm involved in church. I go regularly. For me, that's a vessel for my spirituality to get fed. So for me, the two big books they work together, very much so. And I just continue to walk this path, and my life just continues to get better. I still have difficulties. I still have fears. I just don't have problems. It's. I've never been happier. Now when I look in the mirror, I like the man I see. I try not to stay in the mirror too long. We do a book study on Friday nights, which has been my excuse to Thomas for about the last month. I can't go, man. I got to go to this book study, but we're here tonight. And so in this book study, we're reading the chapters. We're reading the book. So last week we read chapter 5, and it talks quite a bit about the third step and the fourth step. And I was so energized about reading that chapter 5, that we had a really good discussion. Then I went home and I pulled out all the paperwork and all my journaling and my little file that I hope no one ever finds. But I got it out, and I did like a little mini book study with myself, and it jazzed me up for this program. It showed me growth. It showed me where I need to continue to grow, and it was like a recharge. It's just, it's, for me, it's like going to a meeting. I go to a lot of meetings. Meetings are like touch and base, and you get a recharge. So today, my life pretty much consists of prayer. Then I go to work and do what we have to do to survive. I try to be a gentleman. I try to be a gentleman. I try to give the client, everyone, the best that I can, that I have to offer. I accept, for the most part, when things aren't going my way. I try not to make too many messes. I'm kind of a hothead, so I occasionally have to backtrack and clean some stuff up, but I always do, because I can't sleep if I go to bed and I know that I didn't come clean, or I'm not living the spiritual principles. I'm not being honest. I'm not using brotherly love. I'm not being of service. Um, you know, I just can't sleep because this thing's in my blood now. So my life is much better. I like it. Today I practice honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. I set healthy boundaries. I try to give back. I've worked with a few guys. I'm working with a guy now. I continue to be led on this path with my sponsor and my sponsee brothers. And faith is probably the biggest change in my life. Today it's we, it's not me. That's all I got.